Is it worth it to go to graduate school for artificial intelligence? Find out in this video. But first, if you're new to the channel, I am Dr. Phil Tabor. I have a PhD in condensed matter physics that I got in 2012 and promptly went to work for Intel Corporation as a back-end dry-edge process engineer. I left in 2015 to pursue my own ventures and have been doing freelancing, consulting, artificial intelligence ever since. Quick note, if you want to get a jump start on learning how to read deep learning papers and turn them into code, you can check out my new course, Deep Q Learning from Paper to Code, on sale at Udemy right now for $9.99. But back to the topic of the video. So when you're thinking about going to graduate school, you really want to ask yourself a few different questions. What is it that I hope to get out of going to graduate school? What is it that I'm going to be giving up by going? And what is the probability of success in achieving my goals? So if you are looking to become a researcher in the field or a faculty at a university, then you pretty much certainly have to go do a graduate degree in artificial intelligence, computer science, some related field. Now, if your goal is to get a job, a well-paying job, then it's a little bit more murky. So there are many companies that will hire you without a degree at all, and many for which a portfolio plus an undergraduate degree would be sufficient. Heck, in some cases, you don't even necessarily need an undergraduate degree, you just need a strong portfolio. I recently saw an interview with a guy, I forget his name, Emil something, who landed a job at Google, no less, I believe, as a self-taught developer. He went on a mission to find himself for a few years after graduating high school, and then decided to become a deep learning engineer and did quite well for himself on the self-study track. So you may not even necessarily need an undergraduate degree if all you want is a good job at a great company. So, okay, let's assume that you want to push the envelope and really push the limits of understanding of artificial intelligence, or you want to be a faculty at a university, and so you pretty much have to go to graduate school. So what is it that you can expect when you get there? Well, now, full disclosure, as I said, my PhD is in physics. However, in conversations with other students and looking over other programs in various fields, the experience is more or less universal. The only thing different is what you're studying. So there are a number of common factors to which I can speak on. And in particular, I'm thinking of course, the coursework you have to deal with, but this is just the easiest part. Now, make no mistake, the coursework is difficult. And you're going to be tested to the limits of your understanding, and the homeworks will be difficult, the exams will be difficult, the whole thing will be hard, but that is in fact the easiest part. Typically following the coursework, you will have some set of written qualifying examinations. Now, the written qualifying exams, you don't get any notes usually. With software engineering or computer science, it may be a little bit different, where you have a take-home test or something like that, or it's an in-class exam with a computer and you type out solutions to problems, through code. I'm not entirely certain, but either way, you're going to be timed. You're going to have a set of problems you probably haven't seen before, and you must pass it in order to become what is called a PhD candidate. So if you pass these exams, you have completed generally the first step in becoming a PhD candidate, and there is in fact an entirely separate step to completing the process of PhD candidacy. So that second step is in many cases proposing a research topic. In my graduate program, it was simply presenting a sort of defense of someone else's paper. It wasn't really necessarily related to what you want to do, although it was generally tangential, but we had to go and prove that we could dissect a paper, understand the arguments presented, find the weaknesses in those arguments where the authors may have left some holes in their argument that perhaps the reviewers didn't catch. You have to demonstrate a capability to think critically, think scientifically, and to generate new ideas in research. So it's kind of a mini defense, but on someone else's research, which makes it even more difficult. Once you pass the coursework, written qualifying exams, and your oral defense of your PhD candidacy, you become what is called a PhD candidate. Now, at that point, you are probably done with your coursework. Maybe you have one or two left to take, more advanced courses that you weren't able to stuff in your first couple years. But at that point, you are full-time research. Now, this may sound awesome, but this is actually the most challenging part. So what can you expect while doing full-time research as a graduate student? So everybody's experience is going to vary, and the probably biggest factor in your experience as a graduate student is going to be the professor that runs your lab. Now, when I was at West Virginia University, I worked under Sergey, who was a hardcore Russian, brilliant scientist, a man I look up to even to this day as a incredibly competent, intelligent human being who taught me an enormous amount, really one of my first mentors. and he was really great to work for it. What's kind of funny is that other students had warned me away from it because he had fired another student a couple years prior to me getting there. Now, he had fired the guy because, and I saw this with my own eyes, he went to work for another faculty, and every time I would go down there to use their equipment, the dude was farting around on the internet, looking stuff up, looking at cute cat videos, not doing anything related to physics, generally not a very ambitious or driven student. And so the guy got, fired from the lab because my professor was a new faculty at the time, which is a big influence in my experience as a graduate student. So as a new professor, they have to hit the ground running. They are expected to produce something relatively quickly. The mantra publish or perish is very much a real thing, and it is the reality for these faculty. You have to publish to not only get funding, but also to meet the requirements of your department. You have a department head who says you got to publish X number of papers per year, and they enforce that pretty strictly. And as a new professor, you can be fired, not at any time, but you will have a review coming up, and if you didn't meet the requirements of what they set forth, you're out of a job and you got to go find one somewhere else. And keep in mind, there are only a limited number of these positions. If you want to be a faculty, you're going to be competing against 100, 200, 300 other people for one position. There may be 10, 20 positions open, but there's going to be thousands of people applying for them, all of them applying for the same positions. So you're going to be in fierce competition. And even when you get the job, it is far from certain that you're going to keep it. So in my case, being the only graduate student, or at least the first graduate student, he hired some others as we progressed along, but being the first graduate student in there meant I got to work very, very closely with my professor, who was a total workhorse. The man worked 14-hour days. I'm not kidding or exaggerating. He would leave at 2 a.m. and be back at 8 a.m. to teach classes the next morning. Pretty much 7 days a week. He wasn't teaching classes on the weekend, but he was still working, 12, 14-hour days. And so I got to work very, very closely with him and really learn the ropes of scientific research by watching a professional do it, which you may not have the experience. Now, my wife, whom I met in graduate school, worked for another faculty who was already established, had a lab with many students, and had a totally different style of managing things. Now, I worked very closely with my professor, and anytime we ran into an issue, we would problem solve it together. He would help guide me for the most part. Some stuff I had to solve on my own, but there was certainly support if I needed it. In my wife's lab, it was totally different. The students were completely and totally on their own. And this is actually the norm. If you're working for a well-established professor, they're not lazy. It's not like they don't work. It's simply that they have higher level tasks. They're kind of like a CEO. Their job is to bring money into the department. They have to bring in millions of dollars to the department because the university system is horribly bloated. It's a huge bubble, but that's the system you're dealing with. And the consequence is faculty are pretty much not obsessed, but have to work tirelessly to get funding, to secure funding, to give talks, to network, to make new connections, to find other people to do collaborations with. And so they have a full-time job basically selling the research of their lab, just like a CEO has to sell their product. So the consequence of that is that you, the student, are going to be left on your own. And in fact, you're going to probably be relying on other students or maybe postdocs for support and help. But remember, they're in the same boat. They are trying to get their PhD, or the postdocs are even worse off because they have to mentor the students, but they're also trying to become a professor as well. So there is an enormous constraint on intellectual capital in these well-established labs where students are kind of siloed on their own individual projects. You may not even know enough to help the person next to you, about their project, because all their projects are heavily specialized. That's what being a PhD means, is getting, really, really deep into one thing, deeper than anybody else on the planet, becoming an expert in it and presenting final research. But that just means that nobody can really help on the detailed nuances of your problem, even if they want to, and they may not always want to. So there are situations in which students may actively try to sabotage you, and I dealt with that as a graduate student myself. So in my fourth year, I started, one of the benefits of my lab was I got to kind of do different projects. I was given a lot of freedom to do kind of what I wanted, as long as it was something that we could publish. And you may not have that experience if that was mine, but I worked with this other tyrannical professor that my wife worked for, and we worked in something called molecular beam epitaxy. It's a way of growing thin films. It relies on ultra high vacuum, so atmospheric pressure is like 700, and the pressures we worked at were 10 to the minus 12, or 10 to the minus 10, sorry. So 12 orders of magnitude difference there. Ultra high vacuum, ultra pristine, ultra clean environments, and they're giant chambers, several feet in diameter, 4 or 5 feet tall, with really expensive vacuum equipment hooked up to them. So the particular type of vacuum equipment is called a cryo pump. It goes down to 4 Kelvin, which is, really, really cold. And basically what that does is freezes out all the contaminants in the chamber. So anything that bounces up there because you're in the molecular flow regime gets stuck on the carbon and basically removed from the chamber. And so there is no contribution to the pressure. Now what this means is that if that pump heats back up, all that stuff gets belched back into the chamber, and you end up with a contaminated chamber that has to be opened up and then shut down and then pumped out with a manual pump and then baked. You have to bake it with a heater. You have to coat it in a big blanket and then, like it's cold, and warm it up over the course of a week. It takes a week to go from atmosphere down to 10 to the minus 10. And so what I found in my last year, my 4th year at WVU, was that I would come in always on a Saturday and my cryo pump would be off. This happened several times. Only on a Friday night. None of the other chambers had the same issue, even though they were all in the same circuit. It wasn't a power surge. It was almost certainly human intervention. Another student, I believe, who was jealous of my relatively modest success, was sabotaging my efforts at research, but I didn't let that bother me. I just took it as a sign of whatever. I got a week to read, to learn, to do other stuff. And it wasn't like every week it happened. It was periodic. It was 2 or 3 times. And as soon as I left, my professor got a job at another university. I followed him there. As soon as I left, the problem stopped. It never happened again. So it was certainly a human intervening to try to hobble my research. And you may find this in graduate school yourself. Unless you have a personal vendetta, though, it's unlikely. But the more competitive environments, that may be a common practice with students actively trying to sabotage each other, because remember, you're all in competition. You're all going to be going for postdocs. You're all going to be going for a limited number of positions. It is very, very cutthroat. And if you do get a faculty position, you're competing with these people for, finite funding dollars. So another thing to consider is that they may not be able to help you. They may not want to help you. In fact, they may want to actively hinder you. Now, other things that aren't talked about graduate school are the kind of the emotional roller coaster side of it. It is an intensely rewarding experience to see a novel result for the first time, to see something that no one else has seen, particularly in physics when you're getting kind of deep insights into nature, how nature works. It was quite an exhilarating experience to see it, and it made you want to work more, made you want to work harder to see, to probe the boundaries, to see how far you could take the effect, to see all the different things you could learn. But that came at a significant cost. Many long nights, many nights spent alone doing research. So isolation is relatively common. Students are siloed, faculty are siloed to a lesser extent, but a little bit. So isolation is one common emotion. I didn't experience it too much, but there were many nights in which it wasn't the norm, but there were many nights in particular on isolated events where, people were out having fun. Some of the other students weren't as dedicated to research as I was, so they were out partying. But I couldn't go because I was running an experiment in the lab, and it required, it couldn't be automated. I had to be there observing in real time to see what the sample was doing. And so this may be the case with you as well. And in fact, I heard from many individuals to varying degrees, some worse than others. I knew one student whose project didn't work, and that was quite common. And in that lab, if it didn't work, you were screwed. The professor wasn't going to shift you over to another project because the grant funding was for that project in particular. So he wasn't he didn't loosen that restriction and allow students to kind of help each other and work on different projects, so that way you could maximize the total number of papers. He didn't care. He was already well established. Didn't really matter to him. It was on the student to get it figured out. Didn't matter if the physics behind it was wrong and it would never work even in principle. That didn't matter. Only mattered there was a grant and it had to be done. And so the student was left holding the bag at the end of the day. And the consequence was the dude ate himself to medicate. He didn't eat himself. He wasn't cannibalizing himself. He ate too much to medicate the issue away. So he tried to drown his sorrow in food, and we know the end result of that, and it's not not something you really want to experience. Of course, not something you have to do. Other students, had more positive reactions to it. They hit the gym, they just worked harder, or they found other ways of solving the problem. But just know that it's an emotional roller coaster where you have intense highs of seeing new things, where if you're an intensely curious person, if you like research, you're going to get that dopamine hit from, seeing something new. But the flip side is you're going to have to sacrifice your social life. Probably you're going to have to sacrifice human connections, and it could at times be lonely and isolating. And in some extreme cases, if you allow it to go that far, if you don't take ownership over your situation and your emotions, you could slip into depression and anxiety. But that's only if you choose to. I believe you have the choice whether or not to do that. You could, take charge of the situation and improve your life in other ways. So once you have finished your research, your next order of business is to defend your PhD. Now, what this entails is you must have already written at least one paper, typically, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5. I'm the first author, and I think 2 or 3 of them, 2 of them, I believe, and then co-author on 3. Really 2 papers, first author is really what you're looking at minimum. Some students do better than that. Others only do 1 and just get out of pity. They're like, we want to get rid of you, whatever. You're clogging up our pipeline. You're clogging up our numbers. Some students get out, on pity basis. But don't count on that, and you really don't want to be in that boat because that takes 7 years. It only took me 5. I was on the lower end of the distribution. Most people is 5 to 7. I was ambitious and kind of worked hard from the very beginning, so I got out in 5 years, luckily. But once you have published the papers, you have to write up your dissertation, which will be kind of a recap of your papers as well as the background in the field, and you have to choose your PhD committee usually, which is the people who will judge you and determine whether or not you get your degree. Choose wisely, choose very wisely. And, it's kind of interesting. I picked people that I thought would be not soft on me, but would ask the right intelligent questions and kind of challenge me, but not try to take me down. You don't want someone to try to take you down. And in fact, one of the faculty did do that. And it was quite strange. My advisor wasn't there because we had switched universities, and he was still, I think we had to have someone else chair my committee, but of course my advisor was still, there via Skype helping me along. So I was kind of alone with the wolves, but he was there listening and offering in, what help he could, because he had a vested interest in getting me out and graduating his student, of course. But it's a very intense process, very intellectually rigorous. They have read your thesis. They will read your thesis. They will find the mistakes in your thesis. They will make you fix them, and they won't let you finish until it is at a state in which they are happy with it. And that, how long that takes is up to you and how well you write. So it could be good, it could be bad, but you choose your committee wisely. Once you pass that, you are done. You are finally done, and hopefully you spent the last 6 months looking for a job, because that process takes time too. All processes take time. But at that point, you are free to go, free to proclaim yourself a PhD, which is, a pretty good feeling to be amongst a handful of individuals that have the intellect, the drive, and the opportunity to do so. So, if you do it, if you've done it, congratulations. That's quite an accomplishment. I salute you for that. And just keep in mind that don't be too arrogant about it. Be humble, learn from others around you, particularly those with real world experience, and do your best to work hard at your new job, at least as hard as you did on your PhD. So with all that said, would I go back and redo my PhD experience? Now, I wouldn't go now at almost 40. There's no way you could ever convince me to go back to school for anything, for any reason. I'll take a few online courses, if that, but there is no universe in which I'm going back to school. I'm glad I went, at the time I did, and I certainly wouldn't change that. It was an intensely rewarding experience. It was challenging, certainly. It pushed the limits of my understanding, pushed the limits of, what you can tolerate mentally and emotionally. But at the end of the day, it was a positive experience. I came out of it a better person, better researcher. I came out of it slightly smarter, I hope. And so for me, it was incredibly worth it, though some others may have had a different experience. And I wonder to what extent that depends on what they put into it. I'm a firm believer you get out of life what you put into it. And some people just didn't put very much in, so I don't expect them to get very much out. So I hope that was helpful. Let's recap a little bit. Why should you go to graduate school? You should go if you want to become a world-leading researcher, if you want to become a faculty, if you want to lead a research lab, then you certainly have to get a PhD. There's no two ways around that. But just know that you're in for a rather long 5 to 7 year experience where you're going to have to take and pass classes, which is the easy part. You're going to have to pass a written exam. You're going to have to pass some sort of oral defense of either your topic or some other topic related to your field. And then you're going to have to publish papers. You're going to have to do the research. And and one other thing I didn't mention is you're going to have to teach other students. You're going to have to be a TA, which means teaching labs usually, and grading papers. That's a couple years of work. That's a nuisance, but it's not a big deal. We all did it. It's, it's okay. Not a huge issue, but it's something you got to do. It's, part of the trial. And then you'll finally get out and you'll find a job, hopefully waiting for you. If you did your part, published well, made connections, and applied to lots of jobs before you got out. So I hope that was helpful. If you found it so, please make sure to hit that like button. Leave a comment down below with your experience in graduate school if you've been. I would definitely appreciate that. Remember, my new course, Deep Q Learning From Paper to Code, where I teach you how to read deep reinforcement learning papers and turn them into Pythonic PyTorch code, is on sale about until the end of the month at $9.99. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.